Welcome to our next lecture on Descartes' Meditations. This will be a two-part lecture, and this is the first part. So let's get into it. This is René Descartes, who is sometimes called the father of modern philosophy. He's the inventor of the coordinate plane, if you remember this from your math classes. He was a cognitive scientist who did a bunch of work on perception, but also an astronomer and a geologist. He drew these models of the Earth. Um, and the project in the Meditations is to try to develop a system of belief and knowledge, and specifically of mind and world, that uh, is consistent with the new way of doing mechanical science, which is by measuring and finding falsifiable uh, uh, hypotheses that are backed up by physical data rather than just by sense data. And to make that consistent with the deist theological Christian belief system. So, as he says, some years ago, I was struck by the large number of falsehoods that I had accepted in my childhood, and by the highly doubtful nature of the whole edifice that I had subsequently based on them. I realized that it was necessary once in the course of my life to demolish everything completely and start again from the foundations, if I wanted to establish anything at all in the sciences that was stable and likely to last. So, what Descartes is saying here is, look, I've believed some things throughout my whole life that are false. I've had to change my beliefs. I've also believed some things that are true. In fact, I think most of my beliefs are true. But because I've believed some things falsely and some things truly, I'm not always certain which is which. I'm not sure which beliefs I'm going to throw out and which ones I'm going to keep. So for this one time in my life, I'm going to throw everything out and see what's left and start from there and build back from whatever might be left from a foundation. So Descartes here is questioning knowledge as justified true belief. So we might have a belief that's true, that matches the world, and is justified for reasons. And at the very least, we need to explain what we know and why we know it by virtue of some sorts of justifications. But if some beliefs require some justifications, then how do we know that justification? And how do we know what justifies that belief and that belief and that belief? What ends up happening is that our chain of justifications and of reasoning for what we know can regress ad infinitum, infinitely. And what Descartes wants is not an ad infinitum regress of justification. He wants to start from a firm and solid foundation that he can build the rest of his superstructure of beliefs and knowledge from. So that looks like this. It's like a house, right? Where the foundation of the system of belief and of knowledge are principles, axioms, postulates. They're the sorts of first principles and self-justifying sorts of propositions from which we can combine and manipulate and change to generate proofs and theorems and a more complex set of things that we say that we know about the world. So for Descartes, the foundation for knowledge should be indubitable. It can't be doubted. They must be first principles, which is to say that they're the very beginning of inquiry. There's no justification for them. They justify themselves. And those foundations ought to be self-evident, that they ought to just be what we know for the sake of like knowing them. They can't be discovered, but they must be present in us. And this leads us to the meditations. So Descartes is going to be stripping away everything he knows to build it all back eventually. So to begin the destructive project to strip everything away, he introduces what's called the first doubt. So Descartes says, I can usually trust my sense knowledge, but sometimes I'm deceived about my sensory experiences. For instance, really far away objects look really small, but it turns out that the mountain is not actually that small on the horizon. It's just far away. Sticks look bent in water. They're not actually bending. It's just the light is refracting in a peculiar sort of way that our eyes can't tell the difference. So Descartes says, I can doubt my senses. Knowledge that comes to me on the basis of senses is sometimes true and sometimes false. So I'm going to throw that all out. My senses are not these firm, foundational first principles that are indubitable. Yet, there are some sensory experiences that seem to be indubitable, that like I'm sitting here giving a lecture now, or that Descartes is sitting there by the fire or hearing it crackle. There's something very real and visceral and true that doesn't seem like the refraction of light of a stick bent in water or appearing bent in water or a faraway mountain. There's something very real about our just presence here. And so Descartes introduces a second doubt. The second doubt is called the dreaming doubt. Descartes says, well, even that feeling or that experience of um, the world seeming so real can happen to me in a dream. I'm awake because I'm having an experience of sitting here by this fire, but I might have imagined myself having an experience of sitting by the fire and then woken up and thought to myself, dang, that felt like a really real dream. I can't believe how surreal it is to wake up from an experience where I thought I was awake. And so even our sense of reality can be undermined or at least made doubtful. Even if just the tiniest sliver of doubt, the very itty bittiest sliver of doubt, gets in the way of what Descartes is looking for. Again, those firm methodological foundations, the first principles, the indubitability, the self evidence. So Descartes says that the most realistic dreams can even undermine our experience of like reality in general. So, does our sense of reality in general give us unshakable belief? Well, no, says Descartes. So we wipe away even our sense of what it is to be in the world as counting as this sort of foundation upon which we can build a system of belief. So Descartes then asks, well, okay, let's say I get rid of all my sense knowledge and I get rid of all of my sense of understanding of being present in the world of like reality, the empirical stuff that's out there, my sensory contact to the world and all that. Let's say I get rid of all of that. Do I at least know that the internal angles of a triangle add up to 180 degrees? Do I at least know that a square has four sides? Um, I have certain what's called a priori knowledge, which is knowledge that doesn't require experience of the world, that the mind is simply able to reason to. For instance, two and two is four. Do I know this sort of thing? Is this mathematical a priori knowledge the sort of foundation that I'm looking for? Descartes says no, because he can imagine that it's possible that there's some evil genius or manipulative demon that, and again, this is a hypothetical, it's an imagination. Descartes doesn't actually think that there is an evil genius puppeteering and controlling his mind, but it's possible that. And if it's possible that, even if it's incredibly, vastly, unbelievably unlikely, its possibility invites doubt into the knowledge that we might have. And so that sort of knowledge, the mathematical stuff, can't serve as a firm foundation. But what is this evil genius doing? The evil genius is manipulating and controlling our minds, at least in this hypothetical, such that we think two and two is four, or that the internal angles of a triangle add up to 180 degrees. But really, in reality, for the evil genius, two and two is five. And the internal angles of a triangle add up to some other number than 180. Uh, you can imagine, for instance, the movie The Matrix, right? This is a case where this is happening. The Matrix is a movie where there's a vastly intelligent AI system that puts you in a pod and turns you into a human battery. Um, and it gets you to think that you're having an experience of reality when in reality, you're not actually. So, for a similar sort of matrix style hypothetical, Descartes says, I'm able to doubt my mathematical and a priori beliefs. So, this will not as well serve as a foundation for knowledge. So, here's the three doubts recapitulated. The first doubt is the sense doubt, which is that we can doubt sense knowledge. The second dreaming doubt says that we can doubt scientific or empirical knowledge. And the final doubt says that we can doubt all knowledge, including a priori knowledge. So, what next? Now that we've stripped away everything that might be believed, what are we left with? Cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am, which we'll discuss in the next lecture. But what this is Descartes saying, uh, in the lack of all knowledge that is foundational, that I can know indubitably, I have none of that. At least what I have is the sense of being a thing that thinks. I am uh, doubting and I may be deceived, but in order to doubt and in order to be deceived, I must be thinking at all. And so I exist, I am, on the basis of the fact that I'm thinking. So we get the I think, therefore I am, from which Descartes builds back all the rest of scientific knowledge and eventually, as is relevant for our class, a theory of mind. So we'll do that in the next lecture.